Now we are joined from Washington, D.C. by Asia One correspondent Jagruti Dave. Welcome, Jagruti, to Asia One. So walk us through exactly, so what did J.D. Vance say on the John Rogan podcast? And how specific was he?
J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, eventually defended the preliminary deal that the US had struck with Iran in June. There are a lot of people in the US and Israel, critics, who say that the deal did not do enough to curb Iran's missile program. So J.D. Vance said, "I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there have been people within the Israeli government who are trying to shift us away from that policy because they want to continue the military campaign." But he also went on to say there are many countries and allies as well as of the United States who try to influence American policy. And he says that's just a fact of being a political leader in 2026. He was asked if he thought that the US would have got into this war with Iran without Israel. Essentially, he said no. He said yes, the US would have gone into this war anyway, pushing back against the idea, I guess, that Israel forced America into this war. But his criticisms of Israel is the latest public rebuke coming from the Trump administration towards Israel. The president has also been publicly more critical than he has been in the past of Israel, a signal, I guess, that the US and Israel, very close allies, and they remain so, but they do have diverging war aims as the conflict has continued.
Has the White House or Vance's office, have they issued any statement or clarification, in fact, since the interview was aired?
So neither J.D. Vance's spokesperson or anyone from the Israeli embassy in Washington have commented to US media about this yet. But I think what's interesting about this interview, that as much as it is about the Israel-US relationship, it's also a reflection of the relationship between J.D. Vance and his boss, President Trump, on their positioning regarding Iran. J.D. Vance is known to be more critical of the war and of American intervention abroad. He said on the podcast that he knew that Joe Rogan and many of his own friends were strongly opposed to the war. But the vice president at this point, seen by many as Donald Trump's successor to the White House, said that he would support the president and his calls as long as they were legal and ethical, and he believed that the Iran war fit that bill. And he told Joe Rogan that he had tried to make his role in mediations as successful as possible.
And what does it tell us about one saying that Israel funded a $45 million lobbying effort aimed at swaying American opinion toward continued war? And is this now a lie rupture in the US-Israeli relationship?
Well, as I've just mentioned, J.D. Vance said that there were other countries, both allies and adversaries, who tried to influence American policy. And he said that that is just the reality of being a leader in 2026. And this is not the first time the US administration has openly shown differences of opinion with Israel. The president himself, as I say, has been critical of the Israeli position of wanting to push for more military action when the US was pursuing diplomacy. But of course, since then, the US and Iran have returned to tit-for-tat escalations, with the US doubling down on its threats to hit Iranian infrastructure, saying that the US is prepared to continue hitting Iran hard until it comes to the negotiating table. Crucially, both Iran and the US have kept the door open to diplomacy. The US has called, President Trump has called the recent release of a US dual national who was detained for the last 2 years in Iran a gesture of goodwill. And Iran's top negotiator has said that while it's ready to continue hitting US targets in the Middle East, it also, and expand the targets that it would consider, it is also, the top negotiator has also said that diplomacy must also play a role in allowing Iran to achieve its aims. So I think the question is this good? Is diplomacy good for both sides? Do they both recognize the need to come to the negotiating table? And at least that is what mediators are hoping is going to happen.
And from Tehran's perspective, does a US and Israel's public split over the war aims give Iran more room, do you think, to maneuver diplomatically, or does it make Iranian hardliners double down, expecting the war to continue regardless?
Well, many experts are saying that the diverging war aims of the US and Israel is possibly good for Iran. Reduces the chances of a joint attack. If the US wants diplomacy, it could persuade Israel to stand down, as it has done with Lebanon, for example, and that gives Iran time to regroup or to pursue negotiations. But there are some who also argue that both the US and Iran need a respite in the war, despite the conflict. You've got the issue of oil prices, rising oil prices, with the resumption of tensions that is going to play into the US midterms here. For Iran, you've got concerns about a bruised economy and damaged infrastructure. And as I say, mediators hope that enough that both sides realize that that in order to achieve their respective aims, it's not just military efforts that need to be considered, but they need to think about diplomacy and return to the negotiating table.
Many thanks, Jagruti.